Jayden Carter sat alone in the quiet classroom, the words, "Why Harvard Needs Me," boldly crowning his essay. Outside these walls, his mother mopped hospital floors to keep their lights on. Inside, his dreams reached beyond their circumstances. When Mrs. Holloway spotted the essay, her laughter sliced the air. "Harvard? Know your place," she sneered, ensuring the remaining students heard. Marcus and Leon, sons of wealth and privilege, joined her mockery. They expected shame from this 16-year-old black boy from the wrong side of town. Instead, they got quiet dignity as Jayden packed his work and walked away. None of them could possibly imagine that in just weeks, a Harvard dean would walk through their doors, asking for Jayden by name. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the classroom windows, turning the ordinary high school space into something almost magical. Most students had long since fled the building, eager to escape into freedom. But 16-year-old Jayden Carter remained hunched over his desk, pen moving steadily across paper. His dark brown eyes narrowed in concentration as he carefully crafted each sentence, occasionally pausing to glance at the scattered reference books beside him. "Why Harvard Needs Me," read the heading at the top of his paper. The title stood bold against the white background, a declaration of ambition that seemed to glow with purpose. Jayden didn't notice Mrs. Holloway enter the classroom. She moved quietly, her heels making little sound on the worn linoleum floor. She observed him for several seconds, noting his complete absorption in his work. Only 3 other students remained in the classroom's far corner, finishing makeup assignments. My, what has you so engaged, Mr. Carter?" Mrs. Holloway's voice cut through the silence, making Jayden jump slightly. He looked up, momentarily disoriented by the interruption. "Just working on an essay, Mrs. Holloway." She approached his desk, curiosity evident in her narrowed eyes. Without asking permission, she tilted her head to read his paper's title. Her eyebrows rose dramatically, and something shifted in her expression, the mild interest transforming into thinly veiled mockery. "Harvard?" The word hung in the air between them, inflected with such disbelief that it might as well have been a laugh. "Harvard, Jayden? Be realistic." The 3 students in the back of the room stopped their work. One of them, Marcus Williams, nudged his friend Leon Bennett and snickered. Both boys came from the wealthiest families in the district, their designer clothes and easy confidence setting them apart from most students. "Mrs. Holloway," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the room. "Maybe Jayden thinks they need more people to clean the dorms." His perfectly white teeth flashed in a cruel smile. Leon joined in, emboldened. "Yeah, I hear McDonald's is hiring too, Jayden. Might be a more realistic career path than Harvard." Laughter filled the room, echoing off the walls. Jayden felt heat rise from his neck to his face, but kept his expression carefully neutral. He'd perfected this mask over years of similar moments, the art of appearing unbothered when everything inside him burned. "I'm just exploring options," Jayden said quietly, beginning to gather his papers. His movements were deliberate, dignified, even as his hands betrayed the slightest tremor. Mrs. Holloway made no effort to stop the mockery. Instead, her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It's good to have dreams, Jayden, but there's a line between ambition and delusion. Perhaps focus on community college first?" Jayden slipped his essay into his worn backpack, zipped it closed, and stood. "Thank you for your advice, Mrs. Holloway." His voice remained steady, giving nothing away. As he walked toward the door, Marcus extended his foot, nearly tripping him. Jayden sidestepped it smoothly. He'd seen that move too many times before. "Harvard." "Material right there," Leon jeered. But Jayden was already through the door, his back straight, his pace unhurried until he was safely in the empty hallway. Only then did his shoulders slump, just slightly, before he straightened them again and continued walking. 5 miles away, at Mercy General Hospital, Evelyn Carter pushed her cleaning cart down a sterile corridor. Her hospital uniform was crisp despite being 8 hours into her shift. At 42, Evelyn's face showed the gentle lines of a woman who smiled often despite life's hardships, who found joy in small victories and refused to be broken by setbacks. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Glancing around to make sure no supervisors were nearby, she quickly checked the message. From Jayden. Rough day. Just 2 words, but they carried a weight only a mother could fully understand. Evelyn frowned, pausing in her work. After 16 years of raising Jayden alone, she could read volumes in his brief texts. This wasn't ordinary teenage drama. Something had hurt him today. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and continued working, but her mind stayed with her son. During her break, she retreated to the staff lounge and pulled out her wallet. Hidden behind her ID was an old, creased photograph of a handsome young black man wearing a Harvard sweatshirt, his smile wide and confident. William Carter had died before their son was old enough to remember him, but sometimes Evelyn saw flashes of him in Jayden, especially in that quiet determination that both father and son shared. She ran her thumb gently over the photograph before tucking it away again. There were secrets there, stories untold, but some truths waited for their proper time. The autumn afternoon had faded into evening by the time Jayden walked home. His route took him through neighborhoods that grew progressively rougher. Past corner stores with security bars on their windows, apartment buildings with peeling paint, and the occasional group of men eyeing passers-by with suspicion. Jayden knew how to move through these spaces, confident enough not to appear weak, humble enough not to seem challenging. He stopped at the local library, a small branch with limited hours, but a librarian who knew him by name. Cutting it close. "Today, Jayden," Mrs. Werner said, glancing at the clock showing just 15 minutes until closing time. "Sorry, just need to print something for tomorrow." He slid into an empty computer station and quickly pulled up a draft of his essay from his email. The printer hummed to life, spitting out 3 pages that Jayden studied carefully before folding and placing in his backpack. By the time he arrived home, a small but tidy apartment in a building that had seen better days, his mother had already texted that she was working a double shift. Jayden made himself a sandwich, settled at their small kitchen table and pulled out his homework. The Harvard essay he placed aside, something about it now tainted by the afternoon's humiliation. Later that night, long after the school hallways had emptied of students, Mr. Whitmore, the elderly school janitor, pushed his cleaning cart past Mrs. Holloway's classroom. His weathered hands guided the mop across the floor with practiced efficiency, his movements belying his 70-plus years. He paused when he noticed a crumpled paper in the trash can nearest Jayden's desk. Something about the way it had been discarded, forcefully, angrily, caught his attention. Glancing around to ensure he was alone, Mr. Whitmore retrieved the paper and carefully smoothed it out. "Why Harvard Needs Me," he read, his thick glasses sliding down his nose as he bent closer to the page. As he read further, his eyes widened. The writing was remarkable, passionate, articulate, with the raw honesty that comes from lived experience rather than practiced privilege. This wasn't the work of a student parroting expectations. This was the voice of someone with something genuine to say. Mr. Whitmore folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered to the empty classroom. The next day, Mrs. Holloway stood before her advanced English class with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Students shifted uncomfortably as her gaze swept over them, lingering just a moment longer on Jayden. "Today, I'm announcing a special extra credit assignment," she announced, writing on the whiteboard with precise strokes. "You will each write a Harvard application essay." A few confused glances were exchanged around the room. Jayden kept his eyes down, focused on his notebook, feeling the weight of stares from classmates who had either witnessed or heard about yesterday's interaction. "As we've discussed, Harvard represents the pinnacle of academic achievement," Mrs. Holloway continued. "This exercise will help you understand the level of excellence required for such institutions. Perhaps it will even give some of you," her eyes flicked toward Jayden, "a more realistic perspective on your future paths." The assignment wasn't subtle. It was a pointed message, a public undermining thinly disguised as education. Jayden felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up his neck again, but he refused to give her the satisfaction of showing it. "Will this be graded on a curve, Mrs. Holloway?" Marcus asked, smirking in Jayden's direction. "Quality always stands. Out, Mr. William," she replied, just like mediocrity. After class, Jayden hurried to his locker, eager to escape further attention. Jade Thompson, a quiet girl who usually sat at the back of the classroom, approached him hesitantly. With her worn clothes and guarded expression, she seemed to share his outsider status, though they'd rarely spoken. "That was messed up," she said simply, her voice low. Jayden glanced at her, surprised by the unexpected alliance. "Just another day in paradise," he replied with a shrug that aimed for nonchalance. "You're actually going to do it, though, right? The essay?" "Yeah," he said after a moment. "I'm not going to let her win." Jade nodded, a flicker of something like respect in her eyes before she disappeared into the hallway crowd. That night, Jayden sat at the rickety kitchen table, papers spread around him as he worked on revising his essay. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional drip from the leaky bathroom faucet and distant sirens from the street below. In the bedroom, Evelyn Carter carefully wrapped her mother's gold bracelet in a soft cloth. It was one of the few valuable things she owned, a family heirloom that had survived generations. She tucked it into her purse, steadying herself against the wave of regret that threatened to overwhelm her. It wasn't the first sacrifice she'd made for Jayden, and it wouldn't be the last. The next day, while Jayden was at school, Evelyn visited 3 pawn shops before finding one that offered a fair price for the bracelet. That evening, she presented Jayden with a second-hand laptop, not the newest model but functional, with a working battery and enough memory to handle his schoolwork. "Mom, how did you—" Jayden's question trailed off as he recognized the determined set of her jaw. He knew that look, the one that said, "Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to." "You need it for school," she said simply. "And for Harvard applications." Jayden's eyes widened. "You heard about that?" "I hear everything eventually," she replied with a small smile. "Now, you make that computer earn its keep." For the next week, Jayden worked relentlessly on his essay. He rose earlier, stayed up later, and spent his lunch periods in the library researching successful Harvard applicants. The borrowed laptop became his constant companion, its keys growing familiar under his fingertips as he crafted and refined his words. On the day the assignments were due, Jayden arrived early to print his final draft in the school library. The wee printer hummed as it produced the 5 perfectly formatted pages. He read through it one last time, satisfaction warming his chest. Whatever Mrs. Holloway's intentions, she had pushed him to create something he was genuinely proud of. What he didn't notice was Marcus standing nearby, watching with calculated interest. As soon as Jayden left for his first class, Marcus approached the printer, where an extra copy of Jayden's essay remained in the tray, forgotten in Jayden's hurry. "Check this out," Marcus said to Leon between classes, showing him Jayden's essay. Little Harvard hopeful left this behind. Leon scanned the pages, his eyebrows rising. "This is actually good." "Too good," Marcus replied, a plan already forming. "Way too good for someone like him." During lunch period, while most students were in the cafeteria, Marcus and Leon accessed one of the computer lab terminals. Within minutes, they had copied sections of Jayden's essay into a document and placed it in a folder labeled Jayden Sources on the school's shared drive, a space teachers could access. "Now we just need to make sure Holloway finds it," Marcus said, closing the file with a satisfied smile. "Anonymous tip?" Leon suggested. "Perfect." The next day, Jayden was called to Principal Grant's office during 3rd period. As he walked the long hallway, curious eyes followed him, and whispers trailed in his wake. Something had happened, but he had no idea what. Principal Grant was a tall, austere man who ran the school with detached efficiency. His office was impersonal. No family photos, few decorations, nothing to suggest the human behind the administrator. When Jayden entered, Mrs. Holloway was already there, her expression a mixture of triumph and manufactured concern. "Sit down, Mr. Carter," Principal Grant said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Jayden sat, his heart rate accelerating despite his efforts to remain calm. "Do you know why you're here?" the principal asked. "No, sir." Principal Grant slid several papers across the desk. Jayden's essay alongside printouts of academic articles and essays from Harvard's website. Certain passages were highlighted in both documents, showing undeniable similarities. "Can you explain this?" The principal asked, his voice neutral but his eyes already conveying judgment. Jayden stared at the papers in shock. "I don't understand. I wrote this, all of it." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Mrs. Holloway interjected. "These passages are nearly identical to published works." "That's not possible," Jayden insisted, his voice rising slightly. "I've been
working on this for weeks. I have drafts, notes, manufactured after the fact, perhaps," Mrs. Holloway suggested. Principal Grant studied Jayden with disappointed eyes.
Plagiarism is a serious offense, Mr. Carter, one that could effectively end any Ivy League aspirations. The injustice of the situation threatened to overwhelm Jayden. He gripped the edges of his chair, forcing himself to breathe steadily. "I did not plagiarize anything. Someone is setting me up." "A convenient excuse," Mrs. Holloway said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mr. Whitmore stood in the doorway, his janitor's uniform slightly rumpled but his expression resolute. "Excuse me for interrupting," he said, his gravelly voice filling the room. "But I couldn't help overhearing. I believe there's been a misunderstanding about Jayden's work." Principal Grant frowned at the interruption. "This is a private disciplinary meeting, Mr. Whitmore." The elderly janitor nodded but stepped fully into the office anyway. "I understand that, sir. But I've seen Jayden working on that essay for weeks now. Late evenings, early mornings, in the library during lunch. I've emptied enough trash cans with his discarded drafts to know he wrote every word himself." The unexpected defense left everyone momentarily speechless. Mrs. Holloway recovered first, her voice sharp with irritation. "With all due respect, how would you know what constitutes original work at the Harvard level?" Mr. Whitmore simply smiled, the gesture transforming his weathered face. "I read, Mrs. Holloway. Quite extensively, actually." Principal Grant cleared his throat. "While I appreciate your input, Mr. Whitmore, we have evidence that suggests academic dishonesty." "Evidence that appeared rather suddenly, I imagine," Mr. Whitmore replied. "Perhaps you might want to check when those source files were created in the system." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Principal Grant's face. He tapped briefly at his computer, examining something on the screen. After a moment, his expression changed subtly. "It seems the files in question were created only yesterday," he admitted reluctantly. "That doesn't prove innocence, but it does raise questions." Mrs. Holloway's face tightened with displeasure. "You can't possibly be taking the word of a janitor over documented evidence." "Evidence that may have been fabricated," Principal Grant replied, his tone cooling. He turned to Jayden. "In light of this uncertainty, you will be placed on probation, rather than suspended. Any further incidents of questionable academic integrity will result in severe consequences. Do you understand?" Jayden nodded, relief washing through him even as anger simmered beneath. "Yes, sir." "Thank you." As they left the office, Mr. Whitmore fell into step beside Jayden. "Keep your head up, son. Some people fear what they don't understand, and some fear those who might outshine them." Before Jayden could respond, the older man disappeared down a side hallway, his mop bucket squeaking slightly as he went. That evening, Jayden Carter stood outside Mrs. Holloway's classroom, her hospital uniform exchanged for clean jeans and a simple blouse. She'd taken time off between shifts, precious hours she couldn't truly spare, to address the situation her son had described. Mrs. Holloway looked up from her desk, surprise quickly masked by professional detachment. "Can I help you?" "I'm Jayden Carter, Jayden's mother." Recognition flashed across the teacher's face. "Ah, yes. Please come in." Evelyn entered, declining the offered seat. She preferred to stand, to maintain whatever small advantage her height might provide. "I want to discuss what happened with my son's essay." Mrs. Carter, I understand your concern, but academic integrity is non-negotiable at this institution. Integrity works both ways, Evelyn replied evenly. My son has never cheated a day in his life. He's worked harder than most to overcome the obstacles placed in his path, some of them by teachers who decided what he was capable of before giving him a chance. Mrs. Holloway's expression hardened. I assess all students by the same standards. Do you? Evelyn challenged. Because from where I stand, it looks like you're holding some to a higher standard just to watch them fail. I'm sorry you feel that way. Mrs. Holloway's voice cooled several degrees. Perhaps if you spent more time overseeing his academic work instead of other activities, these situations wouldn't arise. The implication hung in the air, a judgment about Evelyn's long working hours, her absence during homework time, her position cleaning floors rather than helping with calculus. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, a controlled fire that suggested deeper reserves of strength than the teacher had anticipated. My son will succeed despite people like you, Mrs. Holloway. Not because of you. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. And when he does, I hope you remember this conversation. The following day, Jade approached Jayden at his locker. Her usual guardedness had softened slightly, replaced by something like resolve. I saw what happened, she said without preamble. Marcus and Leon. They took your essay from the printer. Jayden's eyes widened. You saw them? She nodded. I was in the library alcove reading. They didn't notice me. Would you tell Principal Grant? Hope coloring his voice. Jade hesitated, fear briefly shadowing her face. I can't get involved like that. I'm sorry, but I wanted you to know you're not crazy. They set you up. Before Jayden could press further, she slipped back into the crowd of students, her shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself invisible. That afternoon, Mr. Whitmore found Jayden sitting alone on the school steps, waiting for the city bus. Mind if I join you? The janitor asked, lowering himself carefully onto the step beside Jayden. Free country, Jayden replied with a shrug. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes before Mr. Whitmore spoke again. You know, I spent some time in Boston many years ago. Yeah? Beautiful city. Terrible winters. But the university's there. Now that was something special. His eyes took on a distant look. Places like Harvard, they're not just buildings and books. They're ideas, possibilities. Jayden glanced at him curiously. Did you go to college there? Mr. Whitmore smiled enigmatically. Let's just say I spent my fair share of time around those hallowed halls. He patted Jayden's shoulder as he stood. Don't let anyone dim your light, son. The world has enough darkness already. As Mr. Whitmore walked back into the school, Jayden noticed a strange air of dignity about the old janitor, something that transcended his worn uniform and calloused hands. Later that night, well after the school had emptied, Mr. Whitmore made his way to a storage room in the basement. Using a key from the large ring at his belt, he unlocked a door that few at the school even knew existed. Inside, among dusty sports equipment and outdated textbooks, stood a large wooden crate. Mr. Whitmore pulled the chain on a bare bulb overhead, illuminating the space in harsh yellow light. He brushed away years of dust from the crate's lid, revealing a label that read, Harvard Alumni, Malcolm Rivers. His fingers traced the name almost reverently before he opened the lid and began searching through the contents with careful purpose. Found you, he murmured, lifting out a thick folder. Just what the boy needs. The early morning light filtered through the library windows, casting a golden glow across the worn tables. Jayden sat across from Mr. Whitmore, their voices hushed in the empty space. They had begun meeting here 3 mornings a week, arriving before most teachers had even pulled into the parking lot. Rhetoric is about more than fancy words, Mr. Whitmore explained, sliding a dog-eared book toward Jayden. It's about understanding, how language moves people, how it can change minds or harden hearts. Jayden ran his fingers over the book's cover. Elements of Argument, a text and reader. It looked college level, far more advanced than anything they studied in Mrs. Holloway's class. "You think I can understand this stuff?" Jayden asked. Mr. Whitmore's weathered face creased with a smile. "Son, I've been watching you for months. You already understand it better than most. You just need the vocabulary to name what you're doing." These morning sessions became a ritual. Mr. Whitmore would share books that seemed to appear from nowhere, guiding Jayden through concepts that stretched his mind in new directions. They discussed logical fallacies, studied great speeches, and practiced techniques for building persuasive arguments. "Where did you learn all this?" Jayden asked one morning, as Mr. Whitmore dissected the structure of Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. The janitor's eyes twinkled. "Let's just say I've had time to read and listen. And sometimes the most important education happens outside classrooms." As winter deepened, Jayden's skills grew. He began seeing patterns in arguments, identifying weaknesses in reasoning that he'd previously missed. The quiet confidence in his writing expanded to his speech. Even when he remained silent in class, which was often given Mrs. Holloway's continued coolness toward him, his mind worked differently, analyzing, evaluating, preparing. One evening in late January, Jayden sat at the kitchen table reviewing his calculus homework when Evelyn returned from her shift. She looked tired but determined as she set her purse down and joined him. "I've been meaning to show you something," she said, pulling an old photo album from the shelf beside their small television. She flipped through several pages before stopping at a faded photograph of a young man in graduation attire. "Is that Dad?" Jayden asked, leaning closer. Evelyn nodded. "Your father's high school graduation. He was valedictorian." She turned another page to reveal a letter on official-looking stationery. And this was his acceptance letter to State University. Jayden studied the letter, confusion evident on his face. "I thought, didn't he go to Harvard? You have that picture of him in a Harvard sweater." Evelyn's fingers traced the edges of the acceptance letter. "He never made it to Harvard, Jayden, not as a student. He had a full scholarship to State, but what he really wanted was Harvard. He'd planned to transfer after his first year." Her voice grew soft. "He was brilliant, smarter than anyone I've ever known. But life doesn't always follow our plans." "What happened?" Jayden asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "I got pregnant with you," Evelyn said simply. "And he chose us. He chose family over Harvard, worked 2 jobs while taking night classes at State. He never complained, not once." She looked directly into Jayden's eyes. "But he never gave up. That dream either. He used to say he was just delaying it, not abandoning it." "And then he died," Jayden said quietly. Evelyn nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Car accident when you were 2. But I want you to know, he would be so proud of you, not just for dreaming about Harvard, but for fighting for it when it would be easier to give up." Jayden absorbed this information in silence, a new understanding of his father taking shape, not just a distant memory or an idealized figure, but a real man who had faced difficult choices and made sacrifices. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he finally asked. Evelyn closed the album gently. "Some things you need to discover in your own time, in your own way, and maybe I needed to wait until you were ready to carry this story forward." The next day at school, Jade approached Jayden between classes, something urgent in her expression. "Have you heard about the citywide essay competition?" she asked without preamble. Jayden shook his head. With everything happening, he hadn't been paying attention to announcements. It's sponsored by the University Alliance Foundation. The final judging panel includes representatives from Ivy League schools, including Harvard. Her voice dropped lower. The winner gets a scholarship and automatic consideration from the schools on the panel. Jayden's heart rate quickened. "When is it?" "Applications are due next week. The competition itself is in 6 weeks." She hesitated before adding, "You should enter. Your writing is really good." Before Jayden could respond, she handed him a folded flyer and disappeared into the crowded hallway, leaving him to wonder how she knew about his writing abilities. That afternoon, Jayden approached Mrs. Peterson, the school's guidance counselor, about entering the competition. The kind-faced woman was reviewing the requirements when Mrs. Holloway appeared in the doorway. The McAllister essay competition? Mrs. Holloway's voice carried a note of surprise. I wasn't aware you were considering this, Jayden. Mrs. Peterson smiled, seemingly oblivious to the tension. I was just telling Jayden that our school can nominate 3 students. We currently have only 2, Marcus Williams and Tara Blackwell. I see. Mrs. Holloway's lips pressed into a thin line. Unfortunately, school policy requires that students on academic probation cannot represent Westwood in external competitions. Academic probation? Mrs. Peterson looked confused. I don't recall seeing that in Jayden's file. It's recent, Mrs. Holloway explained smoothly. A regrettable plagiarism incident. I'm sure you understand we can't risk the school's reputation. Jayden's hands clenched at his sides, the unfairness of it burning in his chest. The plagiarism accusation was never proven, he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. And Principal Grant only put me on probation as a precaution. Mrs. Peterson looked between them, clearly sensing the undercurrents. Perhaps we should consult with Principal Grant directly. By all means, Mrs. Holloway replied, her confidence unwavering. 2 days later, Jayden sat across from Principal Grant, who studied the competition paperwork with a furrowed brow. Mrs. Holloway has raised valid concerns, the principal said finally. However, there's nothing in our official policy that explicitly prohibits students on probationary status from participating in academic competitions. Relief flooded through Jayden, though he kept his expression neutral. That said, Principal Grant continued, any further incidents will result in your immediate disqualification. Is that understood? Yes, sir, Jayden replied. Then you may proceed with your application. As Jayden left the office, he found Mr. Whitmore waiting in the hallway, mop in hand but clearly not engaged in cleaning. Good news? The janitor asked quietly. Jayden nodded. I can enter the competition. Then we'd better step up your training, son. Over the next few weeks, Jayden devoted every spare moment to preparing for the competition. After school, he began visiting the law library in the wealthy downtown district, where security guards initially eyed him with suspicion until a kind librarian named Ms. Winters took him under her wing. Argumentative writing techniques, she repeated when he first explained what he was looking for. That's not what most high school students research. Color me intrigued. She introduced him to resources he never would have found on his own. Journals on rhetoric, books on persuasive communication, even access to archived speeches from historical figures. The world of formal argumentation opened before him, rich, with possibilities. Meanwhile, Marcus and Leon watched Jayden's growing confidence with mounting frustration. Their usual taunts seemed to bounce off him now, and Mrs. Holloway's attempts to undermine him in class were increasingly met with respectful but firm responses that left her flustered. This essay competition, Marcus said to Leon as they lounged beside Marcus's new sports car after school. Carter actually thinks he has a chance. So what? You're going to crush him anyway, Leon replied, scrolling through his phone. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he watched Jayden walk toward the city bus. Stop, backpack heavy with books. Maybe, but why take chances? Remember Brad Thompson? He owes me after I helped him pass calculus last semester. What about him? He's working the sound and tech for the competition. I think we need to have a conversation about how he can help. Ensure Carter's big moment goes sideways. Brad, a senior with more technical skills than academic ambition, was easily persuaded by the promise of concert tickets and social inclusion. The plan was simple, a technical glitch during Jayden's presentation that would throw him off his game at the crucial moment. Nothing too obvious, Marcus instructed. Just enough to make him look unprepared, unprofessional. Unaware of these machinations, Jayden continued his preparations. One afternoon, as he and Mr. Whitmore reviewed his practice speech in an empty classroom, the janitor interrupted him mid-sentence. You're arguing from authority here, Mr. Whitmore said, but your voice lacks conviction. You need to own these words, not just speak them. Jayden sighed in frustration. I'm trying. Try this. Mr. Whitmore stood up straight, his stooped janitor's posture suddenly transforming. His voice, usually gravelly and quiet, resonated with unexpected power. We are not merely the sum of our circumstances, but the product of our choices in the face of those circumstances. The shift was so dramatic that Jayden stared in amazement. Where did that come from? Mr. Whitmore smiled, resuming his usual demeanor. A speech I gave once, long time ago. What kind of speech? Commencement address, Mr. Whitmore said casually, bending to pick up his cleaning rag. Harvard University? Class of '78. Jayden's jaw dropped. You gave a commencement speech at Harvard? Were you a professor there? The old man's eyes twinkled with mischief. Not exactly. That's a story for another day. He patted Jayden's shoulder. Point is, it's not about where you come from, son. It's about how you carry yourself when you get where you're going. As the competition approached, Evelyn received a letter that left her visibly shaken. Jayden found her at the kitchen table, one evening staring at an envelope bearing the Harvard crest. Mom? What's that? She startled, quickly tucking the letter into her pocket. Nothing important, just some mail. Her forced smile didn't reach her eyes. How's the essay coming along? Jayden let the obvious deflection pass, though his curiosity remained. Later that night, he heard her on the phone, speaking in hushed tones he couldn't quite make out. Whatever connection his mother had to Harvard, she wasn't ready to share it with him. The day before the competition, Jade sought out Jayden during lunch period. They had developed a cautious friendship over the past weeks, though she remained reserved about her personal life. Are you ready for tomorrow? She asked, sitting beside him at his otherwise empty table. Jayden nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. You coming to watch? Jade hesitated. I'll try. Things are complicated right now. Something in her voice prompted Jayden to look more closely at her. The dark circles under her eyes, the slightly unwashed appearance of her hair, the same clothes she'd worn yesterday. Jade, is everything okay? At home, I mean. She stiffened. Why wouldn't it be? Just asking. You seem tired lately. Jade stared at her untouched lunch for a long moment before speaking. My mom lost her job 2 months ago. We got evicted last week. The simple statements hung in the air between them. Where are you staying? Jayden asked quietly. The women's shelter on Monroe Street. She looked up, defiance in her eyes. Don't you dare feel sorry for me. I don't, Jayden replied honestly. I admire you. You're still here, still trying. That takes guts. Something in Jade's expression softened. Yeah, well, same goes for you. We make quite a pair, huh? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. The future Harvard scholar and the homeless girl. Regular high school success story. Despite the gravity of her situation, they both found themselves laughing. A brief moment of connection in the unlikeliest of circumstances. That night, Jayden put the finishing touches on his essay. Legacy is not inherited, it's created. Mr. Whitmore had helped him refine the central thesis, that true legacy comes not from family names or financial inheritance, but from the impact of choices made in decisive moments. As he read through the final draft, Jayden felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he'd experienced before. Whatever happened tomorrow, he had created something meaningful, something true to his own voice. The McAllister essay competition was held at Riverside Convention Center, a gleaming glass structure in the wealthiest part of the city. Jayden felt distinctly out of place as he walked through the ornate lobby. All around him, students from private academies and prestigious public schools mingled confidently, many accompanied by parents in expensive business attire. Evelyn had wanted desperately to attend, but her supervisor had denied her request for time off. I'll be there in spirit, she'd promised that morning, pressing a small, smooth stone into his palm. My father gave me this for luck. Now it's yours. Jayden clutched the stone in his pocket as he checked in at the registration table, receiving a name badge and participant packet. As he turned to find his assigned preparation room, he spotted Marcus and Leon across the lobby, surrounded by a group of similarly well-dressed students. Well, look who it is, Marcus called out, loud enough to draw attention. Westwood's charity case. Several of Marcus's new friends snickered. eyeing Jayden's simple button-down shirt and khakis. His best clothes, freshly ironed but clearly not designer quality. "Good luck today, Carter," Marcus continued, his smile razor-sharp. "You'll need it." Jayden merely nodded and continued walking, refusing to engage. Mr. Whitmore's advice echoed in his mind. The moment you let them pull you into their game, you've already lost. In the preparation room, Jayden reviewed his notes one last time. The competition format was straightforward. Each participant would deliver their essay as a speech, followed by questions from the judging panel. Scoring would be based on content, delivery, and ability to defend the ideas presented. As he waited for his turn, Jayden observed the other students. Most spoke confidently about family connections, prestigious internships, and extensive travel experiences. Their essays seemed built around these advantages, the special insights gained from senator parents or summers studying abroad. "Carter." "Jayden," a coordinator called. "You're up next. Please proceed to the staging area." Jayden gathered his materials and followed the coordinator to a small waiting area behind the main stage. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see the audience, mostly parents, teachers, and other students. To his surprise, he spotted Principal Grant in the back row, arms crossed but attentive. Even more unexpected was the sight of Mr. Whitmore slipping quietly into a seat near the exit. The old janitor had traded his usual work clothes for a simple but dignified suit that transformed his appearance. Had Jayden passed him on the street, he might not have recognized him. 2 minutes, the stage manager informed him. On stage, a girl from Wellington Academy was finishing her presentation about sustainable architecture, inspired by her family's philanthropy in developing countries. Jayden took a deep breath, centering himself. He had prepared for this moment for weeks. His essay was memorized, his arguments solid, his examples personal but universal. "Next presenter, Jayden Carter from Westwood High School," the announcer's voice rang out. Jayden walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily disorienting. He placed his printed essay on the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the audience. "Good afternoon," he began. "My essay is titled, 'Legacy is not inherited, it's created.'" He glanced down at his papers and froze. The pages were blank, complete pristine emptiness where his carefully crafted words should have been. A ripple of whispers spread through the audience. From the corner of his eye, Jayden spotted Marcus and Leon in the third row, barely containing their laughter. Nearby, a tech student, Brad if he remembered correctly, avoided eye contact completely. The setup was clear now. Somehow they had replaced his printed essay with blank pages, expecting him to panic, to flee the stage in humiliation. 3 seconds passed. 4. 5. The head judge raised an eyebrow, pen poised over her evaluation sheet. Jayden closed his eyes briefly, then straightened his shoulders and stepped away from the podium. "I apologize for the technical difficulty," he said, his voice steady. "But perhaps it's fitting for my topic. Sometimes life takes away your prepared script, and what matters is what you've internalized, what you truly believe rather than what you've memorized." He moved to the center of the stage, abandoning the blank pages entirely. "Legacy is not inherited, it's created. This simple truth has shaped my life, though I didn't always have the words for it." The words began to flow, not exactly as written, but with a natural rhythm and authenticity that captured the essence of his essay. He spoke about his father's deferred Harvard dream, without bitterness but with determined purpose. He described education not as a birthright, but as a constantly renewable resource that gained value through use. "We often confuse privilege with potential," he continued, his confidence growing with each sentence. "We mistake accidents of birth for indicators of worth, but true legacy is built in the moments when we choose to transcend our circumstances rather than be defined by them." As he spoke, the audience's initial discomfort gave way to attentiveness. Principal Grant uncrossed his arms, leaning forward, slightly. Even some of the judges had stopped taking notes, simply listening. "I stand before you today not because my path was clear or easy, but because it wasn't. Each obstacle forced a choice, to resign myself to limitations imposed by others, or to find another way forward. In the back of the room, Mr. Whitmore nodded almost imperceptibly, pride evident in his weathered face. The greatest legacy we can create is not a name that endures in buildings or endowments, but in the expanded possibility we leave for those who come after us. When we break through barriers, we create pathways. When we refuse to accept arbitrary limitations, we establish new precedents. Jayden concluded with a quote from his father's journal, words Mr. Whitmore had helped him discover and incorporate. "The dream is never about the destination. It's about proving you belong there all along." The silence that followed his final words hung in the air for several seconds before applause broke out, scattered at first, then building. From his peripheral vision, Jayden could see Marcus and Leon exchanging confused glances, their planned humiliation having backfired completely. The lead judge, a distinguished woman with silver-streaked hair, leaned forward. "That was unexpected, Mr. Carter, but quite effective. I'm curious, how do you respond to critics who might say that institutions like Harvard are designed to maintain certain social hierarchies, not dismantle them?" The question was challenging, perhaps deliberately so, but Jayden didn't hesitate. "I'd say they're partially right. Historically, these institutions have often reinforced existing power structures. But that's precisely why they need students who come from different backgrounds. True excellence doesn't emerge from homogeneity, but from the collision of diverse perspectives. Harvard doesn't need me because I fit a predetermined mold. They need me because I don't." The judge's expression remained neutral, but she nodded slowly before making a note on her evaluation form. After answering 3 more questions with similar poise, Jayden was dismissed from the stage. His legs felt slightly unsteady as he made his way back to the preparation room, the adrenaline beginning to subside. He had done it. Not perfectly, not exactly as planned, but perhaps better for the unexpected challenge. As participants waited for the judge's deliberations, Jayden found himself approached by one of the other contestants, a tall girl from Brookside Academy. "That was impressive," she said simply. "The blank pages thing, was that planned?" Jayden shook his head. "Sabotage, actually." Her eyebrows rose. "Seriously? That's messed up." "Well, you handled it like a pro. Thanks." A man in a tailored suit emerged from the judge's room, speaking quietly into his phone as he scanned the waiting area. "You need to meet this kid," Jayden overheard him say before he disappeared back into the room. An hour later, the finalists were announced. To absolutely no one's surprise, Jayden's name was among them, along with 4 others from various schools. The final rankings would be revealed the following week, but making the top 5 already guaranteed scholarship consideration. As the event concluded and people began to disperse, Jayden found himself face to face with Marcus and Leon in the lobby. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. "Congratulations," Marcus finally said, the word clearly tasting bitter in his mouth. "Thank you," Jayden replied evenly. "The blank pages. That wasn't supposed to happen," Leon blurted out, earning a sharp glare from Marcus. "Shut up," Marcus hissed. Jayden studied them both for a moment. There were many things he could say. Angry accusations, threats to report them, bitter complaints about the unfairness of their actions. Instead, he simply said, "I guess I should thank you. You taught me something important today." "What's that?" Marcus asked suspiciously. "That I'm stronger than your opinion of me." With that, Jayden walked past them toward the exit, where Mr. Whitmore waited. "You did good in there, son," the old janitor said, pride evident in his voice. "Real good. I almost lost it when I saw those blank pages," Jayden admitted. "But you didn't. That's what matters." Mr. Whitmore glanced back toward the convention center. Sometimes the truest test isn't the one you prepare for. It's the one that catches you by surprise. As they walked to the bus stop, neither noticed. Mrs. Holloway watching from her car across the street, her expression troubled. She had come to support Marcus, expecting to witness Jayden's humiliation. Instead, she had seen something that disturbed her deeply. Echoes of a past she thought she had left behind, reminders of her own buried history. In the shadows of the convention center's parking garage, another observer remained. The older black man in an impeccable suit had watched the entire competition with keen interest, particularly Jayden's unexpected triumph over sabotage. Dean Malcolm Rivers of Harvard University pulled out his phone and made a note in his calendar. Follow up on Jayden Carter, priority. The wheels of fate had begun turning in earnest. The morning sun cast long shadows across Westwood High's brick facade as students filtered through the main entrance. It was an ordinary Tuesday by all appearances, except for the sleek black car parked in the visitor's spot typically reserved for district officials. Principal Grant stood at the front entrance, uncharacteristically fidgeting with his tie. Beside him, Vice Principal Dawson whispered urgently, gesturing toward the approaching figure. Dean Malcolm Rivers of Harvard University cut an impressive silhouette as he walked toward the school. Tall, distinguished, with closely cropped gray hair and a perfectly tailored suit, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to commanding respect. At 63, he'd been a fixture at Harvard for nearly 3 decades, known for his brilliant legal mind and unwavering commitment to diversifying the institution. Principal Grant? Dean Rivers extended his hand. Thank you for accommodating my unexpected visit. Principal Grant shook his hand with barely concealed nervousness. It's an honor, Dean Rivers. We weren't aware Harvard was touring schools in our district. The dean smiled politely. This isn't an official recruitment visit. I'm here on a more specific mission. The news of a Harvard dean's presence spread through the school with the speed only possible in the ecosystem of teenage communication. By second period, wild speculation dominated hallway conversations. Mrs. Holloway entered the teacher's lounge to find her colleagues huddled around the coffee pot, voices animated with excitement. I heard he's here to announce a special scholarship program, Mr. Jenkins, the physics teacher, was saying. More likely scouting for that Williams boy, replied Ms. Tanner from the math department. His father's donations could probably build a new library wing. Mrs. Holloway poured herself coffee with a satisfied smile. Of course, Dean Rivers would be interested in Marcus. The boy came from exactly the kind of family Harvard cultivated. Wealthy, connected, legacy material. This was how the world worked. After all, he's in with Principal Grant now, Mr. Jenkins continued. Apparently, he requested transcript reviews for our top candidates. Mrs. Holloway's smile broadened as she stirred cream into her coffee. She'd written Marcus a glowing recommendation just last month. This visit could only enhance her professional standing. The classroom door opened, interrupting her advanced English class mid-discussion. Principal Grant stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Holloway, may I have a word? She nodded, turning to her students. Continue analyzing paragraph 3. I'll return shortly. In the hallway, Principal Grant kept his voice low. Dean Rivers from Harvard is in my office. He's requested to meet one of your students. Mrs. Holloway's chest swelled with pride. Of course. I can send Marcus down right away. Not Marcus, Principal Grant interrupted. He's asking for Jayden Carter. The words hit her like a physical blow. Jayden, there must be some mistake. No, mistake. He was quite specific. Something in Principal Grant's tone had changed, a new coolness, perhaps even a hint of satisfaction at her obvious shock. But why would... He didn't elaborate. Please send Jayden to my office immediately. As Principal Grant walked away, Mrs. Holloway stood frozen, her carefully constructed worldview cracking beneath her feet. Inside the classroom, Jayden was focused on his textbook. When Mrs. Holloway returned, her face tight with suppressed emotion. Jayden Carter, she announced, each syllable precise. You're wanted in the principal's office. A chorus of oohs rippled through the classroom. What did Harvard boy do now? Marcus stage whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Plagiarize. Another essay? Laughter followed, but it died quickly when Mrs. Holloway failed to even smile at the joke. Something in her demeanor silenced even Marcus. Bring your things, she instructed Jayden. You may not return to class. Jayden gathered his belongings, confusion and a touch of apprehension clouding his features. As he walked toward the door, whispers followed him. He caught fragments. Harvard Dean. Principal's office. In trouble again. The hallway seemed longer than usual as he made his way to the administrative wing. What could this be about? Had Marcus and Leon's confession about the sabotaged essay somehow reached the principal? Was this further fallout from the plagiarism accusation? Go right in, the secretary instructed when he arrived. They're waiting for you. They, the plural registered as Jayden knocked on the principal's door. Enter, came Principal Grant's voice. Jayden stepped into the office and immediately froze. Principal Grant sat behind his desk as expected, but the visitor's chair was occupied by a distinguished older black man in a suit that probably cost more than everything Jayden owned combined. Jayden, Principal Grant said, his voice carrying an unusual warmth. I'd like you to meet Dean Malcolm Rivers from Harvard University. The dean rose, extending his hand. Jayden Carter, I've been looking forward to meeting you. Jayden shook the offered hand, his mind racing to make sense of the situation. Thank you, sir. It's an honor. Please sit down. Dean Rivers gestured to the second visitor's chair. As Jayden sat, he noticed Principal Grant watching him with newfound interest, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. I was at the McAllister competition, Dean Rivers began. Your performance was remarkable, particularly your recovery when faced with what I now understand was deliberate sabotage. Jayden shifted uncomfortably. You know about that? Word gets around. The dean's smile was knowing. But that's not why I'm here. I've read your essays, both the official submission and earlier drafts. Earlier drafts? Jayden questioned. Then understanding dawned. Mr. Whitmore. Dean Rivers nodded. Gerald has always had an eye for exceptional talent. But even without his advocacy, your work would have caught my attention. You have a distinct voice, Jayden. Authentic, thoughtful, and refreshingly original. The conversation felt surreal. A Harvard dean discussing his writing as if it actually mattered, as if he mattered. Thank you, sir. I'm here because Harvard has a special interest in students like you, Dean Rivers continued. Your father's influence still resonates in our community. The statement hung in the air, incomprehensible at first. My father? Jayden's voice faltered. I don't understand. Dean Rivers exchanged a glance with Principal Grant, who looked equally confused. Your father was William Carter, correct? Yes, but he never attended Harvard. He went to State University. My mom told me he wanted Harvard, but... Jayden trailed off, increasingly bewildered. The dean's expression shifted subtly. I see. Perhaps we should continue this conversation with your mother present. Is she available to join us? Principal Grant intervened. Mrs. Carter works at Mercy General Hospital. Their shifts are quite rigid, I understand. Actually, Jayden said, she has today off. She's probably at home. Would you be comfortable calling her? Dean Rivers asked. I believe she should be part of this discussion. 20 minutes later, Evelyn Carter arrived at the school, her expression a complex mixture of worry and something else Jayden couldn't quite identify. When she was shown into the principal's office and saw Dean Rivers, she stopped abruptly in the doorway. Malcolm, she said softly. The dean stood. It's been a long time, Evelyn. The familiarity between them was unmistakable, leaving both Jayden and Principal Grant staring in confusion. You two know each other? Jayden asked, looking between his mother and the Harvard dean. Evelyn took a seat beside her son, her composure returning. We met through your father. Dean Rivers nodded. William Carter was one of the most promising research assistants I ever mentored. We worked together on a medical ethics project, a collaboration between Harvard Law and medical schools. But Dad wasn't at Harvard, Jayden insisted, looking to his mother for confirmation. Evelyn took a deep breath. He wasn't a student there. Jayden, he was a researcher. I was too, that's how we met. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. You worked at Harvard, as researchers, both of you. Your father was brilliant, Dean Rivers said. Self-taught in many ways, but with a mind that impressed even the most credentialed academics. He had a particular gift for translating complex ethical frameworks into practical applications. I was helping him prepare his application to Harvard Law when I got pregnant, Evelyn finished quietly. When we needed stability more than dreams. Jayden struggled to reconcile this new information with the story he'd always known. But why didn't you ever tell me? Evelyn reached for his hand. I wanted you to find your own path, not chase your father's unfinished journey. And honestly, it hurt too much to talk about. After he died, those memories became both precious and painful. But the Harvard sweater in the photo, he earned that, Dean Rivers interjected. William was part of our community, even without formal student status. The work he did advanced our research significantly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mr. Whitmore stood in the doorway, still in his janitor's uniform, but somehow looking different, standing straighter, his eyes clear and direct. Gerald, Dean Rivers greeted him warmly. Please join us. Principal Grant's eyebrows shot upward. You know our custodian? Know him? Dean Rivers laughed. Professor Gerald Whitmore was one of Harvard's most respected scholars in rhetorical theory before his early retirement. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the elderly janitor. Mr. Whitmore, Professor Whitmore, smiled slightly. Malcolm exaggerates. I was merely an associate professor with unconventional teaching methods. And a brilliant mind that the academic world lost too soon, Dean Rivers added. Jayden stared at his mentor in disbelief. You were a Harvard professor? All this time? Former professor, Mr. Whitmore corrected gently. Now just a janitor who recognizes potential when he sees it. Gerald contacted me after finding your early essays, Dean Rivers explained. He recognized something in your writing that reminded him of your father. I didn't make the connection immediately, Mr. Whitmore admitted. But once I did, I knew Malcolm needed to meet you. Principal Grant looked completely lost. I'm sorry, but I'm having trouble following all this. The simplified version, Dean Rivers said, is that before his death, William Carter inspired a scholarship program at Harvard, one designed specifically for talented students from underrepresented backgrounds. Jayden has unknowingly qualified for consideration. But there's more to the story, Evelyn added, turning to her son. The letter I received? It was from Harvard Alumni Affairs. They've been looking for us for years. Apparently your father's research formed the foundation for a major medical ethics framework, now used in hospitals nationwide. There are royalties. Jayden's world was expanding and contracting simultaneously, too much information flooding in at once. So what does this all mean? It means, Dean Rivers said, that your Harvard dreams aren't as far-fetched as some might have suggested. But I want to be clear. You won't get special treatment in the application process. If anything, the committee will scrutinize your application more carefully because of these connections. I don't want special treatment, Jayden said firmly. I just want a fair chance. Dean Rivers nodded approvingly. That's precisely the attitude your father would have expected. Now, there's one more matter to address. He turned to Principal Grant. It's come to my attention that some of Jayden's recommendation letters may have been misplaced. Principal Grant's expression hardened. Misplaced? Several teachers attempted to submit recommendations for Jayden's preliminary Harvard application, but the submissions never arrived. When they inquired, they were told the matter had been handled appropriately. All eyes turned to the doorway, where Mrs. Holloway stood frozen, having arrived to check on her student only to walk into the middle of this revelation. Mrs. Holloway, Principal Grant said coldly, perhaps you can explain this administrative error? The English teacher's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. This is a serious matter that will require further investigation, Principal Grant continued. But it can wait until after our meeting with, Dean Rivers concludes. As Mrs. Holloway retreated from the doorway, Mr. Whitmore caught Jayden's eye. The old janitor, Professor, gave him a slight nod that communicated volumes. This was just the beginning. As the meeting wound down, Dean Rivers handed Jayden a business card. The path ahead won't be easy. Harvard isn't just looking for academic excellence. We want students who can thrive in a challenging, sometimes adversarial environment. I understand, sir. No, Dean Rivers said with unexpected firmness. You don't. Not yet. But you will. He turned to Evelyn. Your husband used to say that the true measure of potential isn't how high you can climb when the path is clear, but how you navigate when obstacles deliberately block your way. As Jayden and his mother left the office, they found Mr. Whitmore waiting in the hallway. Your father helped me too, he said quietly to Jayden. Before he was Harvard, he was just a good man. Remember that part of his legacy above all else. News of Dean Rivers' visit spread through Westwood High like wildfire, transforming Jayden's social standing overnight. Students who had previously ignored him now sought his attention. Teachers who had barely noticed him suddenly found his class contributions insightful. For Marcus and Leon, this unexpected reversal was intolerable. This is bullshit, Marcus fumed as they sat in his father's luxury SUV after school. Carter's not Harvard material. He's just a charity case. Leon scrolled through his phone. Apparently his dad worked there or something. People are saying he's got connections. Connections? Marcus scoffed. His mom cleans toilets for a living. Hospital floors, Leon corrected absently, still focused, on his phone. But check this out. I found her social media. He turned the screen toward Marcus. Look at her profile pic. The image showed Evelyn in her hospital uniform, name badge clearly visible. So what? We already know she's a janitor. Yeah, but now we have proof, and a shot of her workplace ID. Marcus's expression slowly transformed as understanding dawned. Perfect for a little public education about Westwood's newest Harvard prospect. Within days, an anonymous post appeared on the school's unofficial social media page, a crudely edited image of Jayden wearing a Harvard sweatshirt, standing beside a mop bucket. The caption read, Harvard's newest charity case, like mother, like son. The post tagged dozens of students, ensuring maximum visibility. By morning, most of the school had seen it. Jayden discovered the post when he noticed the stares and whispers following him through the hallway. Jade showed him the image on her phone during lunch, her expression grim. This is low, even for them, she said. Are you okay? Jayden stared at the screen, a complicated mix of emotions churning inside him. The cruelty was expected, but something about the public mockery of his mother crossed a line he hadn't anticipated. I need to go, he said abruptly, gathering his things. Instead of attending his afternoon classes, Jayden took the bus home, arriving to find his mother unexpectedly there, sitting at the kitchen table with the Harvard letter and several old photo albums spread before her. Jayden, why aren't you at school? Evelyn's surprise quickly transformed to concern when she saw his expression. What happened? He dropped his backpack and pulled out his phone, showing her the post without comment. Evelyn studied it, her face revealing nothing. I see. Why didn't you tell me? Jayden's voice cracked slightly. About Dad, about Harvard, about everything. Evelyn sighed deeply, gesturing for him to sit. It's complicated, Jayden. I'm 16, not 6. I can handle complicated. You're right. She closed the photo album and faced him directly. After your father died, I made choices. Some good, some questionable in retrospect. I wanted you to build your own identity, not live in the shadow of what might have been. But you let me think Dad never went to college, that he was just some regular guy with a dream. He never did attend Harvard as a student, Evelyn clarified. That part was true. He was a research assistant, brilliantly self-taught, but without formal credentials. Malcolm, Dean Rivers, saw his potential and created a position for him. And you worked there too? I was a research coordinator. That's how we met. A soft smile touched her lips at the memory. Your father was designing an ethics framework for medical resource allocation in underserved communities. My job was to compile the data, organize his research. Jayden struggled to reconcile this new information with the mother he'd always known. So how did you end up cleaning floors at Mercy General? Pain flashed across Evelyn's face. After William died, everything fell apart. I couldn't stay at Harvard. Too many memories. We moved back here to be near my mother before she passed. I took the hospital job because it had health benefits and flexible hours to raise you. But why hide it? All from me? Let me believe we were just nobody? Oh, Jayden. Evelyn reached for his hand. We were never nobody. And I didn't want you to think you needed connections or a fancy background to achieve great things. I wanted you to know that your path was your own to make. Would have been nice to know Dad was more than just a dream that never happened, Jayden said quietly. He was so much more, Evelyn agreed, and I should have shared that with you sooner. I just didn't want you to feel pressure to fulfill his legacy. The conversation continued into the evening, pieces of family history finally coming into focus. William Carter had been a community college dropout who taught himself advanced bioethics through library books and free online courses. His natural brilliance had caught Dean Rivers' attention during a public lecture, where William had asked questions that challenged the speaker's fundamental assumptions. Malcolm took him under his wing, Evelyn explained. Created opportunities that the traditional system wouldn't have allowed. Your father was going to be Malcolm's great experiment, proving that Harvard needed to look beyond conventional credentials to find true excellence. Until I came along, Jayden said. Until you came along, Evelyn agreed, and became his new priority. He never regretted that choice, Jayden, not for a second. The next morning, Jayden returned to school with a new resolve. The whispers and stares continued, but they seemed to slide off him now, inconsequential in the larger context of his journey. At his locker, he found Jade waiting. You disappeared yesterday, she said. I was worried. Had some family history to sort out, he replied. But I'm good now. Better, actually. Jade studied him curiously. You seem different. I am. He closed his locker with newfound determination. I'm done letting other people define me. Over the following weeks, Jayden focused with renewed intensity on his Harvard application. Dean Rivers had made it clear. There would be no favors, no special treatment. If anything, the connection to his father meant his application would face even greater scrutiny. Meanwhile, Mrs. Holloway's position grew increasingly precarious as an investigation into the suppressed recommendation letters proceeded. She avoided eye contact with Jayden in class, her earlier condescension replaced by a strained neutrality. One afternoon, Dean Rivers called with an unexpected opportunity. We're running a weekend mentorship program for prospective applicants, he explained. Normally it's by invitation only, but I'd like you to participate. Jayden accepted immediately, only later learning what he'd signed up for. An intensive series of seminars, debates, and writing workshops held at Brenner Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in the state. His first Saturday, there was a stark education in privilege. The campus resembled a small liberal arts college more than a high school, with manicured grounds and buildings named after donors. Students arrived in luxury cars dressed in casual but clearly expensive clothes, exuding the confidence of those who had never questioned their belonging in such spaces. Jayden, in his best jeans and button-down shirt, felt the familiar weight of being an outsider. The registration table attendant checked his name twice, her skepticism poorly concealed. You're in Group C, Phillips Auditorium, she finally said, handing him a packet. The day's structure became clear quickly. Rotating, sessions where students engaged in structured debates, analytical writing exercises, and problem-solving scenarios. In his first group discussion, the topic was ethical dimensions of artificial intelligence in healthcare. As students around him confidently referenced research papers and dropping names of professors they'd met, Jayden remained silent, absorbing the conversation dynamics. You've been quiet, the faculty facilitator noted, turning attention to him. Do you have thoughts to share, Mr. Carter? All eyes turned to him, expressions ranging from curious to dismissive. I'm noticing a pattern in our discussion, Jayden began carefully. We're approaching AI ethics from the perspective of hospital administrators and physicians, but there's another stakeholder group we haven't considered. Which is? The facilitator prompted. Custodial and support staff, Jayden said. The people who clean patient rooms, transport specimens, maintain equipment. AI implementation affects their job security and working conditions, but they're rarely consulted in the ethical frameworks. A few students exchanged glances, some smirking slightly. That's an unexpected perspective, the facilitator acknowledged. Can you elaborate? Drawing on his mother's hospital experiences and his father's research, which he'd been studying since Dean Rivers' visit, Jayden outlined how ethical AI implementation needed to consider its impact across all levels of healthcare hierarchy. By the session's end, the initial smirks had faded. The facilitator made a note on his evaluation sheet, nodding thoughtfully. Similar scenes played out across the day's sessions. Jayden's contributions were infrequent but substantive, offering perspectives that the other students' privileged backgrounds hadn't considered. During lunch, he sat alone until someone unexpectedly placed their tray across from him. Mind if I join you? Jayden looked up to find a girl he recognized from one of the morning sessions, Taylor Roberts from Brenner Academy, according to her name tag. Go ahead, he said, surprised. Your point about AI impact on support staff was smart, she said, without preamble. My dad always says a good leader considers how decisions affect everyone, not just the people in the boardroom. Sounds like a wise man. Fortune 500 CEO, she replied with casual confidence that wasn't quite bragging. But honestly, I was getting tired of hearing James talk about his summer internship at MIT again. You changed the conversation in a good way. As they talked, Jayden gradually realized that not everyone in this privileged world was an adversary. Some, like Taylor, genuinely valued different perspectives. Still, the weekend was emotionally exhausting, constantly navigating microaggressions, proving and reproving his intellectual worth. By Sunday afternoon, Jayden felt drained but also strangely empowered. He could hold his own in these spaces. He belonged in the conversation. As the program concluded, Dean Rivers approached him. Challenging weekend? He asked, clearly aware of the dynamics at play. Jayden nodded. Educational. Harvard isn't always a welcoming place, Dean Rivers said frankly. Some doors will open for you, but others you'll need to push through yourself. The question is whether you're prepared for that fight. I am. Dean Rivers studied him thoughtfully. Your father's journal might help. I believe Gerald, Mr. Whitmore, has it now. The mention of a journal sparked immediate interest. My father kept a journal? He did. Quite insightful about navigating spaces that weren't designed with him in mind. The following Monday, Mr. Whitmore presented Jayden with a worn, leather-bound book. I've been waiting for the right moment to give you this. I think that time has come. Jayden opened it carefully, finding pages filled with his father's handwriting, observations, strategies, reflections on institutional barriers and how to overcome them. One passage stood out immediately. Your dreams will scare small minds. Let them be scared. That same afternoon, Mrs. Holloway was called to the district office regarding the suppressed recommendation investigation. Her absence created a ripple effect of speculation throughout the school. After the final bell, Jayden found her waiting beside his locker, her composed facade cracking around the edges. We need to talk, she said quietly. Jayden regarded her warily. About what? Your mother. Mrs. Holloway glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. I knew her, at Harvard. The revelation was unexpected. You worked at Harvard? I was a graduate student when your parents were there. Her voice was tight with suppressed emotion. Your father received opportunities that many of us had worked years to earn. Special mentorship, research positions, access to faculty that graduate. Students couldn't get. Understanding dawned slowly. You were jealous of him. It wasn't just jealousy, she insisted. It was about fairness, about process. Some of us followed all the rules, checked every box, only to watch an untrained outsider receive recognition we'd earned. So, when you saw me writing about Harvard, it brought everything back. Her shoulders slumped slightly. I'm not proud of how I've handled this, Jayden. The board has placed me on administrative leave pending review. Jayden absorbed this information, silently, unsure how to respond. For what it's worth, Mrs. Holloway added, your writing is exceptional, better than I wanted to admit. Before Jayden could reply, they were interrupted by sudden shouting from the main hallway. They turned to find Evelyn Carter confronting Marcus's father, Douglas Williams, president of the school board and CEO of a regional insurance company. "Your son created that disgusting post about my family," Evelyn was saying, her voice controlled but intense. "I want it taken down and a public apology issued." Mr. Williams towered over her, his expensive suit and commanding presence designed to intimidate. "Boys will be boys, Mrs. Carter. Perhaps if you're concerned about your son's reputation, you should focus on his unrealistic aspirations rather than harmless jokes." "There's nothing harmless about public humiliation," Evelyn replied, "and nothing unrealistic about my son's potential." Students gathered to watch the confrontation, phones recording the exchange. Jayden pushed through the crowd, heart pounding at the sight of his mother standing her ground against such powerful opposition. "Mom," he called out, moving to her side. "Mr." Williams turned his attention to Jayden, looking him up and down with thinly veiled contempt. "Ah, Harvard's newest prospect. Tell me, boy, do you really think you belong at an institution where tuition costs more than your mother makes in a year?" The hallway fell silent, the cruelty of the question hanging in the air. Jayden met the man's gaze steadily, his father's journal words echoing in his mind. "With all due respect, sir, Harvard doesn't need another wealthy student buying their way in. What they need is someone who will actually contribute something original to the conversation." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Mr. Williams's face darkened with anger. "You'll regret that disrespect, young man. I have considerable influence in this district. And I have truth on my side," Jayden replied calmly, "which seems in short supply around here lately." As Mr. Williams stormed away, threatening vague consequences, Evelyn squeezed Jayden's hand. "Your father would be so proud of you right now." That evening, as video of the confrontation circulated online, a citywide Harvard-sponsored essay competition announced its winner, Jayden Carter of Westwood High School. The timing was coincidental, but perfect, a public validation just when the forces aligned against him had reached their peak. For Marcus, watching his carefully constructed social hierarchy crumble as his rival succeeded despite his best efforts, the humiliation was absolute. What neither of them realized was that the real battle had only just begun. Rain pelted against the windows of Westwood High's administration building as Douglas Williams strode purposefully down the hallway, his expensive leather shoes squeaking against the recently mopped floor. Behind him trailed Mrs. Holloway, her face a mask of grim determination, despite her precarious professional standing. Inside the conference room, Principal Grant and 3 school board members sat arrayed at a long table, their expressions varying from discomfort to outright hostility. At the end of the table sat Jayden, alone but upright, his father's journal tucked in his backpack beside him. "Let the record show," Mr. Williams began without preamble, "that this hearing concerns serious allegations of code of conduct violations by student Jayden Carter." Principal Grant's brow furrowed. "Mr. Williams, I must remind you that your position as board president doesn't grant you authority to personally preside over disciplinary matters, especially given your conflict of interest." "I have recused myself from voting," Williams replied smoothly. "But as the complainant, I have every right to present evidence." He turned to Jayden. "Your recent behavior has been increasingly disruptive to the educational environment of this school." "Disruptive?" Jayden asked, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. Williams placed a folder on the table. Public confrontation with a school board official, intimidation of fellow students, suspicious timing of academic achievements. "That's absurd," Jayden responded, fighting to keep his tone respectful. Mrs. Holloway stepped forward. "Mr. Williams has compiled evidence suggesting Mr. Carter's Harvard interview should be postponed pending a full investigation into his conduct." Principal Grant's patience visibly thinned. This meeting was called with less than 24 hours. "Notice, the student has no representation, no parent present. I'm here." Evelyn Carter's voice cut through the tension as she entered the room, still wearing her hospital uniform. "Sorry I'm late. Some of us don't have the luxury of rearranging our work schedules on a moment's notice." Behind her stood Mr. Whitmore and, to everyone's surprise, Dean Malcolm Rivers. Dean Rivers, Mr. Williams faltered momentarily. This is an internal school matter, which directly impacts a Harvard candidate, the dean replied smoothly. As the institutional representative overseeing Mr. Carter's application process, I have a vested interest in these proceedings. Williams recovered quickly. Then you should be particularly concerned about the character issues at hand. Which are? Dean Rivers prompted. Mr. Carter has exhibited a pattern of disrespect toward authority figures, manipulated faculty for preferential treatment, and most recently, publicly humiliated my son Marcus with his essay victory. A strange silence fell over the room. Finally, Principal Grant spoke, his voice heavy with disbelief. Let me understand correctly. You're alleging that Jayden Carter's academic achievement constitutes harassment of your son? The timing and manner were clearly designed to embarrass. Principal Grant held up his hand, silencing Williams mid-sentence. For 3 years, I've maintained a policy of non-intervention in student matters whenever possible. I believed students should resolve their own conflicts. He turned to Jayden. That was a mistake, and one for which I owe you an apology. The unexpectedness of this statement left everyone momentarily speechless. Since Mr. Williams has opened this door, Principal Grant continued, pulling out a tablet, perhaps we should review the complete history of interactions between Jayden and Marcus Williams. He tapped the screen. I've compiled security footage, social media posts and teacher reports documenting a systematic campaign of harassment against Mr. Carter. He turned the tablet to display a collection of screenshots, the doctored image mocking Jayden's mother, text messages planning the essay sabotage, and other evidence of Marcus's bullying. This meeting is adjourned, Principal Grant declared, firmly. And Mr. Williams, I suggest you consider your position carefully before pursuing this further. The district has a zero-tolerance policy for bullying that applies to everyone, even board presidents' children. Williams's face flushed. This isn't over, he snapped, gathering his papers. Actually, Dean Rivers interjected, I believe it is. He passed a document to Williams. This letter from Harvard's general counsel indicates our serious concern about potential interference in our admissions process. The university takes a dim view of attempts to improperly influence candidate evaluations. Williams scanned the document, his expression darkening further before he stormed from the room. Mrs. Holloway lingered, her eyes meeting Jayden's briefly before she too departed, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As the room cleared, Evelyn embraced her son. You okay? Jayden nodded, still processing what had just occurred. I didn't know Principal Grant was collecting evidence all this time. Sometimes, Mr. Whitmore said quietly, those who seem indifferent are simply gathering their strength for the right moment. Dean Rivers checked his watch. Now that this unpleasantness is behind us, we should discuss your Harvard interview. It's still scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow? Jayden's eyes widened. The confrontation with Williams had pushed everything else from his mind. 4 o'clock. Harvard Club downtown. Dean Rivers handed him a card with the address. This is your final formal assessment. Be prepared for challenging questions from alumni, professors, and community leaders. I'll be ready, Jayden promised, though doubt flickered at the edges of his confidence. That evening, as Jayden prepared in his bedroom surrounded by notes, his phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Opening it revealed a series of images, screen grabs of email exchanges between Marcus and Brad, the tech student who had helped with the competition sabotage. The messages detailed their plan and included photos of Jayden's original essay. Final text followed. Thought you might need these. Good luck tomorrow. Before Jayden could respond, another message arrived with what appeared to be a doctored photo of Jayden that had been crudely manipulated to make it appear he was cheating on an exam. Marcus plans to send this to Harvard admissions. Tonight. Be ready. Jayden stared at his phone, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. Even now, with everything that had happened, Marcus was still trying to destroy his chances. The next morning, Jayden showed the images to his mother and Mr. Whitmore, who had come to help him prepare for the interview. We need to get ahead of this, Evelyn said, her jaw set with determination. "If they receive this before you can explain, I have an idea," Mr. Whitmore interjected. "But we'll need to act quickly." 3 hours later, Jayden stood outside the imposing stone facade of the Harvard Club. The historic building, nestled among downtown skyscrapers, represented decades of exclusivity and privilege. Taking a deep breath, he straightened his tie, borrowed from Mr. Whitmore, and walked through the heavy wooden doors. Inside, the atmosphere was exactly as he had imagined: wood-paneled walls, leather chairs, portraits of distinguished alumni. A receptionist directed him to a meeting room where 6 people sat arrayed behind a long table, 3 men and 3 women of varying ages, all watching him with evaluative eyes. Dean Rivers, seated at the center, nodded to him. "Mr. Carter, please take a seat." As Jayden moved to the chair positioned before the panel, the door opened behind him. He turned to find his mother entering, followed by Mr. Whitmore. Their unexpected presence sent a ripple of confusion through the panel. "I apologize for the interruption," Evelyn said confidently, "but there's a matter that needs addressing before this interview proceeds." Dean Rivers frowned slightly. "This is highly irregular, Mrs. Carter." "So is character assassination," she replied, placing a folder on the table. "My son's rival is planning to submit falsified evidence of academic dishonesty to your admissions office. We're here to present the truth before the lie can take hold." Mr. Whitmore stepped forward. "As a former faculty member, I understand Harvard's zero-tolerance policy for dishonesty, but I also know the importance of hearing both sides of any accusation." A silver-haired woman at the end of the table, Professor Eleanor Winters, according to her nameplate, studied the materials Evelyn had provided. These text messages appear to show a deliberate attempt to frame Mr. Carter. "Yes, Evelyn," confirmed. "Along with previous incidents documented by the school." Professor Winters nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention proactively. I suggest we proceed with the interview as planned, with this context in mind." As his mother and Mr. Whitmore moved to seats at the back of the room, Jayden faced the panel with renewed focus. This moment, this opportunity to speak his truth to people who might actually listen, was what everything had been building toward. "Mr. Carter," Dean Rivers began, "Harvard receives thousands of exceptional applications each year. Beyond your academic achievements, what would you bring to our community that others might not?" Jayden took a deep breath. His prepared answer suddenly felt inadequate, too practiced for the gravity of the moment. Instead, he decided to speak from his heart. "Perspective," he said simply. "Not just the perspective of someone from a different socioeconomic background, though that's part of it, but the perspective of someone who's had to fight for every opportunity, who's faced people actively trying to prevent his success, rather than just passive obstacles." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Harvard was built for excellence, but excellence doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's cleaning hospital floors to support a dream that isn't even your own. Sometimes it's an elderly janitor who sees potential where others see presumption. As he continued, Jayden spoke not just about his own journey, but about dignity in the face of humiliation, about community support versus individual achievement, and about why voices like his mattered in institutions like Harvard. "I don't just want Harvard for myself," he concluded. "I want to open doors that others might walk through after me. Because the greatest legacy isn't what you achieve, but who you enable to achieve after you're gone." The room fell silent when he finished. One of the panel members, a distinguished black woman in her 60s, dabbed discreetly at her eye. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," Dean Rivers said, his voice carrying a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Now, regarding your interest in constitutional law." The questions that followed were rigorous, challenging, occasionally even confrontational, testing not just Jayden's knowledge, but his ability to think on his feet, to defend positions without becoming defensive, to demonstrate intellectual flexibility. Throughout it all, he could feel his mother and Mr. Whitmore's presence behind him, supporting him silently as he fought the most important battle of his young life. As the interview concluded, one of the alumni, a tech executive, according to his introduction, pulled out his phone. "Hope you don't mind, but I recorded part of your opening statement. That's the kind of perspective we need more of in our discussions." By that evening, a clip of Jayden's speech had been shared among Harvard alumni networks, then broader academic circles, and finally spilled over into public social media. His earnest, articulate defense of why diverse perspectives matter in elite institutions resonated far beyond the interview room. 2 days later, Principal Grant called Jayden to his office. Mrs. Holloway sat in one of the visitor chairs, her expression solemn. "Following our investigation," Principal Grant explained, "the board has voted to remove Mrs. Holloway from her teaching position, effective immediately." Jayden glanced at his former teacher, surprised to feel a complicated mix of emotions rather than the satisfaction he might have expected. "I've made serious mistakes," Mrs. Holloway acknowledged quietly. "My personal history clouded my professional judgment in ways I'm only beginning to understand." "Before you go," Jayden said, "I have a question. Why did Harvard matter so much to you? Enough to try to stop someone else from getting there?" She considered this for a long moment. "Because I thought it validated me, made all my sacrifices worthwhile." A sad smile touched her lips. "I was wrong about many things, Jayden. Don't make the same mistakes." As she left the office for the last time, Jayden realized that victory brought its own kind of emptiness when it came at such cost. Spring sunlight streamed through the windows of Westwood High's auditorium as students, faculty, and families gathered for a special ceremony. Banners bearing the school colors hung alongside crimson Harvard flags, an unusual sight in a school that rarely sent students to Ivy League institutions. At the center of the stage stood a simple podium, and beside it, a framed photograph of William Carter, Jayden's father, smiling broadly in his Harvard researcher's lab coat. "Principal," Grant approached the microphone, "today marks a significant milestone not just for one of our students, but for our entire school community. The William Carter Scholarship Program will provide support for Westwood students pursuing higher education, with special emphasis on those who demonstrate excellence despite challenging circumstances." In the front row, Evelyn Carter wiped away tears as she watched her late husband's legacy take tangible form. Beside her sat Jayden, now carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced his challenges and emerged stronger. "None of this would be possible," Principal Grant continued, "without the generosity of Harvard University in recognizing William Carter's intellectual contributions, and without the courage of his son, Jayden, who reminded us all what true academic potential looks like." After the ceremony, as people mingled and congratulated the Carter family, a hospital administrator approached Evelyn. "Mrs. Carter, I've been authorized to offer you a position in our community outreach department," she said, handing Evelyn a folder. "Your experience and perspective would be invaluable to our programs in underserved neighborhoods." Evelyn opened the folder, her eyes widening at the job description and salary, nearly triple what she currently earned. "This is long overdue," the administrator finished for her, "and entirely earned." Nearby, Mr. Whitmore found Jayden amid a cluster of well-wishers. The elderly janitor, whose dual identity as Professor Gerald Whitmore was now common knowledge, held a paper-wrapped package. "I have something for you," he said, guiding Jayden to a quiet corner. "Your father left this with me years ago. It seems fitting that it returns to the family now." Jayden unwrapped the package to reveal a faded Harvard sweatshirt, the same, one from the photograph he'd seen all his life. "He wore this the day you were born," Mr. Whitmore said softly. "Said it was the proudest moment of his life, more important than any academic achievement." Jayden ran his fingers over the worn fabric, feeling a connection to his father that transcended memory or stories. "Thank you for everything, Professor," Mr. Whitmore smiled. "I'm retiring next month, going back to Boston, perhaps do some guest lecturing if they'll have an old man like me." "They'd be lucky to have you," Jayden said sincerely. As the crowd thinned, Jade approached somewhat hesitantly. Their friendship had deepened in the months since she'd helped expose Marcus's final attempt at sabotage, but she still maintained a certain guardedness, a protective emotional distance. "So, Harvard man," she said with a small smile, Ready to leave all this behind? Not leaving it behind, Jayden corrected. Taking it with me, including the good parts. Jade nodded, understanding the unspoken message. I got my letter yesterday. Full scholarship to State University. Jade, that's amazing. Jayden's face lit up with genuine happiness for her. The psychology program you wanted? Social work, actually. Turns out, I want to help kids who are where I was. Her expression grew serious. The shelter helped my mom find a job and an apartment. Things are better. As they talked, Marcus's father walked past, barely acknowledging their existence. The scandal surrounding his attempt to interfere with Jayden's Harvard application had significantly diminished his influence over the school. Marcus himself had transferred to a private academy across town, his father's embarrassment too great to allow him to remain at Westwood. From her car in the distant corner of the parking lot, Mrs. Holloway watched the celebration through her windshield. Her career at Westwood was over, her reputation damaged, but as she observed Jayden, the student she had so misjudged, she felt an unexpected sense of closure. Her mistake had been costly, but perhaps not without purpose in the larger story unfolding before her. As she drove away for the final time, Jayden was delivering his graduation speech on the auditorium stage. Not about Harvard or personal achievement, but about community and opportunity. Success isn't measured by the name of the school on your acceptance letter, he told his fellow students. It's measured by the integrity you bring to your challenges, the kindness you show when no one's watching, and the doors you hold open for others once you've walked through them yourself. In the audience, Dean Rivers nodded approvingly. He's going to shake things up at Harvard, he whispered to Evelyn. Just like his father would have, she replied with quiet pride. The following September, Jayden stood at the entrance to Harvard Yard, his father's journal in one hand and his mother's lucky stone in the other. The imposing buildings around him represented centuries of tradition, of power, of a world that had not been built with students like him in mind. For a moment, the magnitude of it all threatened to overwhelm him. Then he remembered his father's words, now committed to memory from countless readings of the journal. The dream is never about the destination. It's about proving you belong there all along. Straightening his shoulders, Jayden Carter walked forward through the gates, carrying with him not just his own dreams, but the legacy of all those who had helped him reach this moment, a legacy he was now responsible for extending to others. What if your greatest obstacle becomes the very thing that proves you belonged all along? Jayden's journey reminds us that dreams defy expectations when backed by quiet determination and unexpected allies. Like and subscribe for more stories that challenge us to see beyond labels and recognize the potential in everyone.